Welcome to Ideagen TV. Today we are especially excited to have with us Brigitte Gosselink, Head of Product Impact at Google.org. Brigitte, welcome.
Thanks so much, George. Great to be here.
You know, what an exciting time for so many reasons, with all of the acceleration of innovation, especially, despite everything that's happening globally. And you're right at the center of that innovation. How incredible is that?
It's a privilege and an opportunity every day to get to do this work, and couldn't be more so than this year of 2020, where we're facing just a tremendous amount of challenges and a tremendous amount of opportunities.
That's right. And for our global audience, you know, I've mentioned your title. You're right at the center, right at the nexus of that innovation. I think it would be wonderful if you could explain a bit about yourself, of course, and your role and responsibilities as head of product impact at Google.org.
Absolutely. So Google.org is Google's philanthropic arm. And our goal is really to think about how we can bring the best of Google to solve some of the world's biggest challenges, and really bringing all of our resources to bear in that. So that, of course, includes funding. We provide about $200 million in grants every year, but it also is thinking about how our technology and our products, and most importantly, our Googlers, our employees who have technical expertise and tremendous skills that they can bring to bear on these topics and on these issues. And that's really the focus of my role in particular. So I'm particularly looking at how we can leverage technology, and especially the cutting edge, most advanced technology that we're using in our products at Google, that we as individuals are seeing transform our interaction with technology every day, to society's most pressing challenges. These persistent, seemingly intractable issues that the global goals are really focused on, where technology really could have a significant role to play in creating new solutions to help us make significant progress.
And so I think that's poignant, because a lot of the conversations that I have been involved in recently on Ideagen TV and beyond have really been the thread line, in terms of a commonality, if you may, has been a focus on not just restarting or getting back to where we were, but rather reimagining, sort of rewriting the future. And I think it's very difficult on so many levels to do that if you're not looking at embracing. I'll give you an anecdote myself. I mean, the restaurant industry, we've seen up close and personal how technology has really allowed those restaurants and retail industries in general to remain in business. For those that maybe hadn't adopted or couldn't adapt quick enough, it's been much more difficult. And so I think that's one example of how innovation is critical, and how technology and adoption of technology is a vital component to what a lot are referring to as a dynamic resiliency. And so how are you using innovation and AI to help carry out your role at Google, and how is it helping?
So back in 2018, we officially launched an AI for social good program at Google. And this is really an effort to bring together a lot of the threads that were happening at the company, that we were seeing with organizations that we were working with outside of Google, to think about really, and as we saw the advances around AI and machine learning, how that technology in particular could be a part of the solution. And I'll speak a little bit more about that, but just to your point, George, we are obviously this year seeing how helpful technology can be, to keep us connected, to try to help our businesses, our small businesses in particular, really continue to grow and sustain during this time, to help our kids be in school, to help government, continue to function, but also just the rapid curve at which that adoption has been required is challenging. And we know that it's challenging in particular for nonprofits and social enterprises, entities that are often underinvested in on the technology side in particular. And so we really wanted to, as we launched this AI for Social Good effort, think about how we could bring significant resources so that, the pie in the sky ideas that organizations might have for how they could use technology would really become a reality. And I'm proud to say that, 2 years later from that point, we've gone from a world where we're talking about the potential of AI kind of ad nauseum to actually really being able to see that in action. We launched this open call that had more than 2,600 submissions from countries around the world, 119 countries, which I think just really speaks to this appetite and how many ideas were really out there. And the call was really, just as I said, what are your ideas for the way in which AI, machine learning can be helpful to better achieve the mission that you're working for? And these projects were across all 17 SDGs. So really underscores the breadth of the possibility there. We gave those organizations funding, so $25 million. As I mentioned, we also think a lot about how we can bring expertise to the table. And to me, our AI expertise as a company is one of our sort of crown jewels, right? We think a lot about how we can leverage that resource most carefully and most specifically. But we had more than 200 Googlers who worked with organizations, from mentoring all the way through to 6-month full-time secondments, where they were actually embedded with organizations, helping them to work through their issues, helping them to sort of put the right systems and tools in place in order to actually use AI in their work. The same AI that is powering, spam filters and photo searches and all of these things that we sort of know and interact with as consumers, now really addressing some of our world's most challenging issues. And one of those in particular, I think, is just really speaks to the promise and potential. So we think about AI, often we think about it as a reduction in inefficiency. So for example, with the organizations that we've supported, we're now able to see that they're seeing a 50% average reduction in the number of days it takes them to achieve an outcome from before introducing those ML models. But the cases that get me really excited are the cases that frankly would literally be impossible without this technology. And one of those is a project from an organization called WattTime, which is based here in the US where I'm sitting, and an organization in the UK called Carbon Tracker. And they came to us with a proposal to really at an idea stage, again, as I said, to use AI, in this case, really computer vision, to analyze greenhouse gas emissions, to get the first picture globally, particularly focused on power plants, of what emissions look like. It's data that we actually don't have. I think we often, think that we must by now have that kind of information, but the typical technology that's used to get that information is relatively expensive sensors that have to be installed on smokestacks. When you think about trying to scale that to every power plant around the world, you start to, inevitably run out of room pretty quickly. And so what they're now able to do, and they've shown this through early proof of concept models, is to use satellite imagery, remote sensing, and some algorithms to be able to actually look at the smoke plumes, the steam plumes coming out of those plants, and estimate the emissions based off that with relatively good accuracy. This will hopefully give us, for the first time, a picture of power plant emissions. And what's even more exciting is that they're actually now collaborating with 9 other organizations who have come together across all other industries, so shipping, steel plant and industrial work, oceans and fishing, who are also looking at similar emissions data and trying to build an even bigger picture through a new effort called Climate Trace that would capture all of the major greenhouse gas emissions that are happening around the globe. And that's the kind of exciting opportunity I think we have, particularly when we see those types of collaborations emerging, where organizations can leverage each other, be building off common platforms, and really taking kind of that inspiration and innovation forward together.
Absolutely profound to hear about the 100% tangible work that you're doing. To your point of actually seeing the impact for one of the literally the world's most vexing issues. And that's what we're talking about here, is being able to harness the power of that technology, in this case AI, to help carry out our inherent responsibility, if we have the ability, to solve and address these issues. And so today, what sort of opportunities are you at Google looking at to create and help to achieve goal number 17, global partnerships of the UN's global goals, and how are you doing so?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, with this example with the Watt Time and Carbon Tracker project that really grew to this type of collaboration, I think that's the set of solutions that we really need. And we need them not just on a sort of project by project basis, but also in platforms that really allow us to bring together, diverse perspectives. So, obviously the work that you all are doing through this type of a forum to foster dialogue is critically important. We've also been supporters for a number of years now of Project Everyone, really on their work and advocating for the global goals and trying to get as many individuals engaged in this conversation as possible. And part of that has been the launch of the Sdg Action Zone, which is again enabling dialogue and bringing together political, civil society, other actors together in forum in order to have those conversations. And I think, at the end of the day, it's these practical, tangible projects where collaboration goes from being a buzzword that we talk a lot about to actually driving tangible change. So I think, obviously the Watt Time example is one. We also earlier this year announced a partnership with the Canadian government, the German government, and Rockefeller Foundation to help break down one of the bigger barriers that we see in allowing more organizations around the world to use AI and machine learning for their goals, and in particular goals that are relevant for even more vulnerable populations and in the global south, and that is labeled data. We know that in order to really deploy models, to build models, you can't be relying on data that does not come from a particular country or place or reflect a particular population. And we also know that, unlike areas of the world where there may be commercial interests to actually be building data sets, when we're looking at, say, small shareholder farmers in sub-Saharan Africa or in India, there's just less incentive. So we have access to just much fewer data sets. So this new partnership, the Lacuna Fund, will actually fund and help curate data sets to focus on all kinds of issues. And it's nice to be in this collaborative engagement because we're able to bring some of our technical expertise. Rockefeller Foundation, obviously, a stalwart supporter of a lot of these issues and has so many great connections on the ground. And then we have, two major government funders. I used to work at the U.S. Agency for International Development, and these are our counterparts in Germany and in Canada, who have influence and who have funding and who really, at the end of the day, will be the kind of entities who need to take forward some of these recommendations in partnership, of course, with local government as well. So again, it's, I think, translating this idea that an ideal that we have around collaboration, which is of course critical, and getting different folks into conversation, but then how do we actually translate that to actual projects on the ground that we know will help to drive impact?
And what you just described, Brigitte, is so incredibly inspiring for a lot of reasons. I think one of the reasons for me personally and professionally is that we're focused here at Ideagen on that cross-sector collaboration. And I just love how you brought together your previous experience at USAID, along with your current role, along with how that fits into the geopolitical support that you've received, and how ultimately what you just demonstrated in that description was that no one entity can do it alone.
That's right.
And that, I think, is an important element of folks to understand, is that no matter where they sit, partnerships are absolutely vital. And so as we're looking at the future, we're looking at partnerships. The companies, the NGOs, the governments that have been successful throughout this 6-month period since the pandemic began, the ones that have been successful are the ones that embraced partnerships prior to this time, when times are good, when times seem like everything's functioning properly. And then suddenly we have this situation where we're all, for the very first time perhaps in human history, subjected to the same hidden enemy, the COVID-19. And in order to be able to create these partnerships, it's very difficult to start new. However, if you already have an understanding of the capabilities as you have, and you've demonstrated, then you're able to pivot and develop that, what's referred to as dynamic resiliency, so that you continue operations and actually do new things because you understand very keenly so the capabilities, the broad-based abilities of other organizations. And so on that same note, what do you see, Brigitte, as forever changed as a result of what we've just experienced?
I very much agree with what you just shared about the shared global experience and global moment that we find ourselves in. And one of my hopes is that we, when I'm being very optimistic, that we actually do have, as a result of that, just a greater feeling of empathy and a greater commitment and deeper understanding, deeper actually built-in experience understanding of what collective action actually looks like. I think sometimes we talk a lot about how we all need to, come together towards shared goals, but this year has really been a test of that, and has asked us to all look at what we're doing individually, at what we're doing in our communities, at what we're doing in our companies, at what we're doing, kind of as a country, and then as a full globe. And it's given us, I think, an opportunity to do that, and certainly has exposed some of the challenges. And I frankly, as the well-used saying, of don't let a crisis go to waste, I think that there's an opportunity now, and hopefully the SDGs themselves can be a bit of a rallying point as we enter into this final decade of action, to say, okay, we know what it looks like now to band together, and we actually can see some change through that. So that's one, I think, hopeful piece. And then the second is a little bit more on the personal side. I think I'm a mom, and I often don't really bring my identity as a mom to work in a meaningful way. And as the world has broken down, the barriers between the walls of kind of home and work, and childcare is no longer a given for a lot more people than it typically is. I'm hopeful that there will be sort of a different conversation to make a lot of this work that has been invisible more visible, that there will be more empathy again for people who cannot afford childcare, that we understand childcare as a critical piece of infrastructure for our society to function in a way that we, I think, perhaps without sort of this breaking point situation, might never have actually been able to realize. So I don't know that I'm sure that will be forever changed, but it's something that I think is critically important. And then in getting to that, right, like having just more of a sense of what it looks like for those who don't have resources to fall back on in these times, but maybe not have resources in a broader time as well.
And you bring up, I mean, I was expecting a profound interview, but certainly we've gone beyond that. You're touching upon such incredibly important issues and topics that I believe we have now shown a light on during the past, time during this global situation we're in. I think there's bright lights shining on the inequalities, the inequities, and ultimately the word empathy is coming up a lot lately, isn't it? And I think empathy is so important because you cannot begin to develop a solution to all of these intractable issues unless you step into the shoes of the people that you're trying to help and the individuals and the locations and everything else. I mean, we're seeing it across the planet that there are absolute inequalities. We know for the most part where they are, and it's time for folks like yourself, and you're doing it, to act, right? And we're all trying to focus and act. It's not just about the words, but the actions. And I want to applaud you again on your earlier references to how you're actually doing that. You're actually doing that. You're investing, you're innovating, you're applying AI, and you're doing all of the things that we're talking about, but in terms of action. We can talk on and on about all the things that should be done, but Brigitte, you and Google have gone maybe a step further because you're actually making it happen. You're helping to address these inequities, and that's critically important. And so, you know, there's so much incredible work taking place now across the planet, right? And there's so many initiatives taking place at Google and google.org where you are. And all of this relates back to goal number 17. Goal number 17 is global partnerships. And as I mentioned in every interview, the goals were agreed upon, and this is what's important, unanimously by all 193 member states, including the United States of America. And so we take politics off the table and we say, we all agree that there should be no hunger. We all agree that there should be no poverty. We all agree that there should be gender equality. We all agree that there should be global partnerships for the goals in order to achieve those goals. And so what are some of the initiatives that you're working on, and how does this relate back to goal 17?
Yeah, so I've mentioned a few, and maybe it's worth just, you know, to your point, and thank you for your kind words. I think we really think at Google, and you know, I think this is where we can all do best is think about how we can bring our unique expertise, what we uniquely have to offer to any particular issue. And the COVID-19 crisis pandemic has really given us an opportunity to broaden that even further. So, you know, from our product work, we've spent a lot of energy thinking about information and getting authoritative information into the hands of people. You know, the searches that we were seeing earlier in this year were 4x the Super Bowl, which is, you know, kind of our typical measure for sort of the high end, you know, people wanting to know what this virus was about, how they should be thinking about it, and what they should be doing. So really partnering deeply with WHO, because, you know, while we have a megaphone, we don't have any, you know, authority in the health space. So we really need to think deeply about how we collaborate with an organization that does have that authority and does have that information to share, to get that information out to folks. So that's, you know, kind of an example from our product side. We've also been doing work, you know, we specifically this year's committed $100 million in cash grants to COVID through google.org, and have been working with a number of organizations to really think about data and AI and analytics. Again, you know, one of those, you spoke about sort of shining a light on inequities, and I couldn't agree more that that's something that this pandemic has, of course, unfortunately, helped us to actually focus more on, and the disproportionate impact of the virus on Black people in America, on Latinx people in America, Native American people, and then all around the globe in a similar context, really exposing some of the failures of our systems, the systemic racism in our systems. We are now in a place where we don't actually have all the data that we need. So back to this question of, you know, we're at Google very data-driven people. So the first thing that, you know, folks around me ask is, well, what does the data say about that problem? And we have only a fraction of the information we need to really understand the disparate outcomes, what might be driving those outcomes, and how we might actually address them. So we've funded some work with the Morehouse School of Medicine to actually create for the first time, you know, a health equity dashboard that, of course, will be relevant for COVID, but will also hopefully be a durable tool that we can use in the United States to actually further understand and build toward a world where we do have true health equity across the country. And that's another example of, you know, we were able to work with, again, deep experts, the people who really understand this work. It was, you know, work that actually at the launch engaged the current Surgeon General as well as multiple former Surgeon Generals. So I think just a real alignment to your point around, like, these are issues that, you know, should be receiving support across the board. And then we also, of course, have a major role for government to play. So Department of Health and Human Services has been engaged with that work, sort of informing it, as well as folks on the Hill. So, sort of more of a US example in that case. But again, to this kind of, let's bring these actors together and let's really try to get to the root of how we might make this better, not just right now, but in the future, by ensuring that we have durable systems, durable data that will help to drive future action. So I think that's been a critical piece of our approach. And to your point on sort of the global goals and Goal 17 in particular, I've had the benefit of working in a career across sectors. So I've worked in the government, I've worked in nonprofits, in foundations, and here at Google in a tech company. And so I think that, I've seen a challenge that happens when we get into a rut thinking about our particular toolbox. This is the option set we have for action. And I'm hopeful, as we continue to, work on some of these problems collectively, we'll end up with a much bigger toolbox because we'll be expanding that to include everyone's. And I think that is the spirit of Goal 17 and really, something that we bring to our work. And I know that you all are bringing as well through dialogues like this.
Absolutely, absolutely incredible insights and perspectives, Brigitte. And in your role as a global leader, what do you think, in your opinion, informed by your incredible career from across sectors? In your opinion, what is the best approach to achieve the SDGs, those global goals, the 17 global goals, by 2030?
I've just tipped my hand a bit. I mean, I'm gonna obviously suggest that data would be helpful. I think focusing our effort, and I know there's a lot of great folks, think of our SDGs and the Deputy Secretary General and many folks focused on that issue. But I do think that will be a critical piece to the puzzle so that we can be really targeted in the work that we know we all need to do. And then I think we need a lot of big ideas. We're not, tapping on the door of those goals. We're not incredibly close to achieving them. So I think, believe deeply, part of the spirit of the challenge I described earlier is this idea that ideas should be able to come from lots of places, and then we need to give them the fuel and the energy to sustain them in the same way that if an idea cropped up here at Google, we would give that time to sort of bear out. So I think having a little bit of risk tolerance for some of those big ideas is going to be the second piece that we'll really need to get there.
Exactly. And now, as we look at all of this and we think about cross-sector collaboration, we think about cross-sector collaboration and innovation, the critical piece there being that they're so vital to helping to solve so many of the world's most vexing issues. We talked about AI. We talked about the importance of data. It's all connected. And so to go further, how do you infuse this notion of cross-sector collaboration into your daily mission at Google and in your personal world to achieve your goals?
I mean, as I spoke earlier, I think that a lot of this is about one, having a clear sense that you don't have the answers. And I think, often at a large tech company, you sort of said earlier, we can't do this alone. Even we as a large entity can't do this alone. Even the UN can't do this alone, any one government. So I think, approaching all of these challenging questions, these massive goals with a real sense of not even being sure that you know the answer initially is critically important, which means that you need to then be talking to people who you think might. So I think that is for the first piece, is just really making sure that those interactions are there and that not sort of trending back to the same answers, the same usual suspects. And then the second piece, and I've said this a number of times, but I think that really getting specific about what your goals are, what others' goals are, and how you can bring those together into something that will specifically drive progress is also what we need. I think sometimes we spend a lot of time trying to kind of make the perfect, really big thing happen, when actually if we started with something that was more achievable and built there, we would potentially be able to drive progress more quickly. And really, you know, thinking about who are the technical people that I can bring into this conversation, who are the experts on this issue that I can bring into this conversation, you know, who might have resources to offer that will help move this forward, allows then for that partnership to form around a very tangible project or opportunity, and then from that hopefully blossom into something. So that's, you know, sort of the philosophy I think that I bring, that we bring as a team to the collaborative work that we're working with, and have seen time and time again with our grantee projects really bear out. You know, if I can indulge in just one more story, there's a woman who has been doing tremendous work in Jordan, working in Yemen, working with patients for Doctors Without Borders, Médecins Sans Frontières. And she herself is a microbiologist, and she was working in the labs to try to help understand bacterial infections coming from, you know, wounds of war and other terrible things coming through their clinic. This is a very specific, important issue that they need to get right. You need to prescribe the right antibiotic for the bacteria that's being presented, or bacterial infection can grow, of course, and we end up with more antibacterial resistance, which is something that affects us all. She had this idea. She's a microbiologist, and she said, hey, I've noticed machine learning, like computers can now recognize images, and my job is recognizing images, and I'm really having a hard time, you know, getting a pathologist who has that skill into Yemen. It's very expensive to buy the equipment, and I can't train someone there to do it. And so she was talking with a friend at a cafe, and who happened to have computer science background, randomly shared this idea that she had, and he said, actually, that seems pretty possible. That project is a project we funded and is now being deployed in clinics, in trial basis in clinics that MSF is running around the world. So I think just that kind of human connection across disciplines that can really drive opportunity, if you're open to it, is the thing that will help us really make collaboration's promise a reality.
So well said, and such an incredible anecdotal story. I think, you know, when we look back to the development, the creation of the Ideagen platform, one of the key reasons we created Ideagen was exactly for that reason, that there's so much happening. And at the same time, when you bring organizations from across sectors together, you develop key insights that you may not have otherwise known, like what you just described. There's another project that was funded that's exactly on topic for what we're looking to do or need. And so we've arrived at the conclusion of this incredible dialogue on this interview today. Brigitte Hoyer Gosselink, Head of Product Impact at Google. Where can folks find out more information about your absolutely incredible, impactful work?
We have google.org is not only our name, but also our website, so folks can check that out. And then also our social media handles on Twitter, we're, I think, at Google.org. And those are great places to check, as well as Google's keyword blog, which is often where we'll put up information about the new projects that we're supporting. And thanks so much, George, for the opportunity and all the work that you're doing to continue to drive dialogue like this, as is hopefully evident from my remarks. Certainly something that I deeply believe in. So grateful to the work that you all are doing.
Well, we are so grateful to you and Google for all you're doing, and personally to you for all your leadership at google.org as Head of Product Impact. What an incredible title, Head of Product Impact. You're making an incredible impact, Brigitte. Thank you so much for the inspiration, and thank you for all you're doing to change the world.
Thank you.